I expect that we have another 15 minutes before we can open because two of the senators are testifying on bills, so they should be here, I hope, with 9:15. Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the Senate Education Committee, and I have 9:15, so we can get started. The first bill we have is Senate Bill 238. It has to do with an MOU understanding between resident schools and the charter schools. Pardon?
Make a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
We are in executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good.
Aye.
So let's continue. The first bill is Senate Bill 238. I've had a couple of amendments, and the first one came in this morning, and I really have not had much of a chance to look at it, except to read it through, but I want to compare it with some of the other things. And since it is my bill, I will use that opportunity to hold it off until I can look at it and check with the charter schools people who requested the change. The next one is Senate Bill 421. Let's see. That was Senator Waters' bill, and has to do, it clarifies the time of payment and the participation by non-public school in the dual and concurrent enrollment program of the community college. Well,
I'll second the motion.
so we have an ought to pass, and we have a second discussion.
Yeah, I think this is providing an opportunity for private school students to have access to dual and concurrent enrollment, and to enter, for those schools to enter into an agreements with the community college system to assure that those students have that access. I think that it's a good expansion of the program. It's a small enough population compared to the overall number. 200 students, they estimated 200 to 300 students compared to 8,000 in the public sector. So it's the last year of the biennium, should have minimal fiscal impact.
Any other comments? I have a comment. I object to the enrolls, that the payment should be made when the child or the student enrolls. Typically, it is when the student completes a program, then the school or the student will be reimbursed. So I would like to take out enrolls and go back to the successfully completes. Any other comments? Senator Shardy.
When we heard the testimony, the department had concerns for the students that might not complete the program. And have we addressed any of that yet?
Well, I think that has to do with the payment. If you just enroll and the college or the community college gets paid because the child has now enrolled and it never completes, what do you do at that point? That's why I think it's generally better to have it so that when the student completes the program with an acceptable grade, and then cost the transfer of money. Senator Prentice.
Thank you, Senator Ward. So I think I hear your concern, but a key component of Senator Waters' bill is shifting that enrollment, payment upon enrollment. So how are we going to accomplish this?
Well, either you agree with at enrollment or you agree with upon completion. Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, yes, I mean, there are these two ways. And I think the point that was made is that, number one, these are regular private school courses that will adopt an outline, a curriculum guide that has been vetted with the community college system so that it meets their credit criteria. Their point was that typically a student will enroll in a course and they pay tuition. And so the community college system, I mean, nobody's out any resources because the students going through the course, they may not complete it because, I mean, what would inhibit them from completing it? I suppose, most often, it would be a satisfactory grade. So it's possible that a student with a D or an F in that course wouldn't get credit. And that would result in no payment if what you were just suggesting was the rule. But the community college system's point is that that's very different from any kind of credit-bearing course that a student would ever enroll in. And that's why this is a significant change. You put a student into a course, they're in your system, you're providing whatever information you do throughout the duration of that course. Student might not complete because they got a D, and now we're going to decide to pull the payment on it, and it's not consistent with the rest of their record keeping. And so I think that they're right. I think that they've identified a weakness in the system. It was there because in the past, the community college system had to ask the Board of Education for a reimbursement. Now the legislature has changed that process, made the allocation directly to the community college system, and the community college system accesses those dollars on the basis of enrollment. That's what they want to do, as opposed to on the basis of completion, which doesn't make much sense anymore because they're not providing the evidence to the Board of Education. So I think we have I think they got it right. Sorry, I think they got it right. Here.
So what you're saying is that a student can enroll, the community college takes that money out and puts it towards the tuition. The student starts the class, doesn't necessarily finish it, and you say that they may get a D or an F, but they have still done something, and the community college should be reimbursed for that.
Yes, because this is a high school course.
Mhm.
It's not like the student has had a life experience that caused them to drop out. I mean, maybe, but highly unlikely. And you know, sometimes students don't satisfactorily complete a course.
That's true. That's very true. Well, most places that I know of, whether it's jobs, institutions, they will often hire their employees, and one of the benefits is that they will pay for their furthering of their education. But they get that when they come in with a satisfactory grade, and usually a C or better. So paying up afterwards, was you have finished your program. It's very common. It's nothing unusual. I just don't like this when they get it, when they enroll, because you have no guarantee what's going to happen. You have money that sits there and is actually wasted at that point if the student doesn't finish. Senator Prentice, did you have something?
Yes, Senator Ward. So there's no even with the best efforts of some students, there's no guarantee that they will make that C. I mean, it may be a challenge. I think we're like judging them coming out of the gate, I wish and hope and want them to go C or above, but even with their best efforts, what if they, are not, they get a D or they get an F? It's different than somebody dropping out. I mean, I think that then putting their best effort forward and not being able to meet the expectations of the program.
Did you want to say something, Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any issues with the way the bill is currently written. I think that the community college has done a fabulous job of integrating these programs with our schools. The fact that they only charge half the cost of a regular course is really wonderful for our schools and the kids. And it really just gives a lot of our kids a step up upon high school graduation. And when I found out initially that we didn't pay in advance, I was a little bit surprised. So I'm in favor of the bill the way it's written. And I'm also excited that it extends the program out to New Hampshire students enrolled in private institutions in New Hampshire.
Senator Shardy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like to use personal experience sometimes when I explain something, so maybe this will help. So I had referenced last time that my son had the ability to take additional courses while he was at Bedford High School. And he was in the IB program, and he took 3 classes, and we paid for them, and we paid first. And then he passed everything, and he did well, but the college that he was accepted to only transferred 1 out of those 3 classes. But I wasn't upset about it because he actually learned something and he had the choice whether to take the class or not. So I'm going to use personal experience to speak to this. Thank you.
Senator Prentice?
Thank you very much, Senator Ward, and I'm going to layer on to what Senator Risciardi has just shared, because I was a high school student because my father passed away when I was an infant, and in order to continue to qualify for certain types of benefits after a certain age, I had to already be in college. So in my senior year in high school, I had to split my time between high school and community college programs, and they were both equally rigorous. But I didn't find it necessarily easy, but it was a great experience, and I got by. So I've actually been in that position, and imagine if they had said, no, we're going to make you, I mean, my mother actually had to pay that bill. There was no sharing of funds then. So I only wish our students the best. We want to support them in any way we can to get forward. And I think that, as Senator Hennessy pointed out, this is actually, financially, it's actually a really, I'll just be, frank, it's a really great deal and a good deal for our students the way it's written. So.
Ms. Fenton, do you have anything that you want to add? Okay. Okay. Any more comments? Are you ready to take a vote on this? We have an ought to pass in a second. All those in favor of the bill?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposition? Aye. So we have 4-1 on the bill. Senator Khan will take it out. The next one is Senate Bill 410. relative to school district transparency. And we just got an additional comments from the School Board Association. We also have an amendment from Senator Carson. Do I have a motion on the bill?
She introduced that amendment when she introduced her bill, so it should be in your folders.
I have two if someone needs one.
Do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make a motion of ought to pass.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Discussion, Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe we have two amendments in front of us right now. One has a number, and it's 0534S, and it deals with free and prompt access by elected members of the school board to school district records for school board purposes. And then the other is a unofficial amendment to address some of the concerns that were brought up in the, and doesn't have a number, and it's to address some of the concerns that were brought up in the public hearing.
Now, those are for us to consider.
Yes, correct. And my question to you is it possible to accept both of the amendments?
This
And-
is not an amendment, this is a suggestion, so we have to make it into an amendment.
Correct. Do we need to have an official amendment for the other option before we discuss it?
Okay. Ava says no.
Okay. Gotcha. So if I want to move the official amendment to pass that, I can do that now?
The official meaning Senator Carson's?
0534S.
Okay. Yes, you may speak to that.
Thank you. I move Amendment 0534S. And I'll speak to that. So this, I was just surprised that this didn't actually already happen in our school boards. I didn't realize that some of them were not receiving the information that they needed to make appropriate decisions. And I think this is common sense legislation that I wish that we didn't actually need to put into writing.
Any other comments on the amendment? Senator Khan?
Well, I guess a question for our colleague. Do we have evidence that school boards are not receiving this information?
Do we have evidence of what?
Evidence that school boards are not receiving this kind of information. And I guess my point is, I don't think it's needed. I mean, I agree with Senator Hennessy. I don't think that this is needed. A school board, I just can't believe.
There are school boards that have not allowed the public to speak. They
Oh,
have
no.
not.
Dude, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I'm speaking only to the amendment.
The
Senator
amendment.
Hennessy moved the amendment, 534. I'm speaking to the amendment.
Okay,
And relative to the amendment, I think relative to the kind of information that we're putting into writing here, I don't know why this practice needs to get put into writing.
Madam Chair?
Senator Hennessy?
So if we look back at the notes from the public hearing, Senator Carson did submit testimony that this has been an issue for school board members obtaining information. And the example she gave, it ended up being a costly issue because of litigation. So if we don't disagree that on the wording of the amendment, or that school board members should have this access to perform their elected duties, then I don't have an issue with the amendment.
Any other comments? Senator Prentice?
So, in the amendment, we're talking about, thank you, Senator Ward, we're talking about free and prompt access by elected members of the school board to school district records. Okay. So, an elected school board member shall have the right to review any such records provided by provided the elected school board member shall not disclose. Okay, so that, I was curious why this was, again, even necessary, but I've never been on a school board. I've only been in a city council, and we only had access to, like, we didn't even have access to personnel records. Like, we had limited access. It was, our only employee technically was the city manager. Things were already protected by law, so I couldn't come in and say, I want to see this information on this employee, and the law will protect me, and the law will protect my, I can't discuss any of it. It's in a non-public way, because I didn't already have access to that. So I don't understand the school board side of it, why these, because if I'm correct, and maybe I'm not, it's as granular as down to about a particular student. Could a student's information be shared? And I might be incorrect, so I'm looking for clarity here from my colleagues. Shall not disclose any student personally.
Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. From what I read of looking back on the testimony, there was no testimony against, from what I've read so far, this amendment. And I do believe that, especially when you go into non-public session and you're discussing matters of personnel issues, you would actually need to have that personnel information. So if you're not given that information to make appropriate judgment on, then, and again, I haven't seen any opposition to this, so.
Senator Khan?
Mr. Christina is here. I
Yep.
think he's
I
kind
was
of
thinking of asking him to come
itching
up.
in his seat. Maybe have, I mean, he knows
wanna-
about school boards, I think.
Come up and sort it out for
It's
us?
the student granular.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Senator Hennessy, I did not specifically object to the amendment when the bill was being heard because I was focusing on the bill itself per se. The problem with the amendment about unfettered access is that the language as written would allow any school board member to walk into a central office and demand that an employee personnel file be presented. Further, it would also allow any school board member to walk into a central office and demand that a student file would be presented, where the school board member would have access to that student file. I understand we have language in here that it says a school board member shall not disclose any student personally identifiable data, teacher identifiable data, or unique pupil identifiers. That doesn't prohibit them from looking at it in the first place, though, which is significantly problematic. NHSBA advises that school board members should not be having access to employee personnel files. If and when they need information that is within that personnel file, it will be presented to them at a hearing before the school board, whether or not that's a non-renewal hearing or a termination hearing, some things along those lines. The language of this would allow any school board member access to any single document at any single time. Further, the other aspect with that is the board has to operate as a whole, as an entity. Being an elected official does not give you, under law, the education laws, are 1,500 pages long. It speaks about the board, the board, the board. Nothing in law about giving rights to an individual school board member. Just because you're an elected official, you don't have any greater rights than anybody else aside from showing up at a meeting and voting and things of that nature. The other aspect, because I know the history of how and why this provision was presented, there was one issue with one school board member in one school district who wanted unfettered access to every single document that was in the school district, to the point where the requests from this individual school board member to the superintendent and to the business manager of the school district were so voluminous that they could not get their work done. The business manager was doing nothing other than trying to respond to one individual school board member, to the extent that the board had to create parameters around how these requests for information from the board to the BA and the superintendent would be presented, so the superintendent and the business manager could get their work done. There was some litigation involved. The board member in question sued her board probably 4 or 5 times, won once, lost 3 or 4 other lawsuits, cost tens of thousands of dollars of legal fees. So that's the genesis behind this amendment. But giving an individual school board member without specific authority from the rest of the board unfettered access to every single document within the school district, NHSBA believes that is a bad practice and should not be codified into law. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Christina. So, excuse me, thank you for highlighting the issues with the amendment. If the amendment were written a different way to say the board, to your point of not a single member, but a majority of members of the board take a vote or whatever they might do, especially in non-public session, for them to request this information, would you have issues with that?
So, relative to student records, absolutely not. School board members should not have access to student records unless it's in relative to maybe a disciplinary matter in which there's going to be a non-public session hearing before the board. Relative to employee matters or personnel matters, we generally do advise that if push came to shove, if a school board, again, the collective entity, directed the superintendent to produce an employee's file, again, presumably a non-public session, that the board might have authority to do that. Whether or not that's a best practice is a whole other question. I think a board would be setting itself up for liability if it were doing that. There's one thing to see evaluations and employee reviews. There's a whole other issue if there may be medical information in that employee's file. They've had to take disability leave. They're on some sort of 504 plan for a disability need accommodations. All that information may be included in an employee personnel file, and that should be locked up only for those who, on a need-to-know basis, if you will. I get the gist of your question, Senator Hennessy. I mean, could I craft something that kind of fit that? Maybe, probably not in the next 10 minutes. So.
Madam Chair, I'd like to remove my motion.
And
and
Senator
again-
Hennessy?
And again, I apologize for not speaking to this when the bill was initially heard. I mean, I saw the amendment, but I was speaking to the bill itself. I didn't know what the sort of proper protocol was for speaking to an amendment that was not really an amendment yet. It was an amendment, but I know somewhat of the process. So I apologize for not speaking to the amendment when the bill was initially heard a couple weeks ago or last week. Anything else from me, Madam Chair?
Senator Hennessy?
Well, I have a question on the next amendment.
Okay. What should we do with this first one? Do you want to?
I just removed it, so we don't, unless somebody takes it up, we don't need to do anything.
Okay. So that is gone. May I speak to the recommendations by Mr. Christina?
So I'm assuming that you crafted this
I
second
did,
one. Thank you
yes.
very much for the effort put into this.
Thank you.
So I really like paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, I have a question on RSA 91A:2, 2.
Yep.
What are and I was just trying to read this very quickly. What are the limits around an emergency
An emergency
meeting?
Sure, thank you very much for the question, Senator. I'm just pulling up the statute here. So this is RSA 91-A:2, paragraph 2, and it's buried in the middle of a very long paragraph. It says, except in an emergency or where there is a meeting of the legislative committee, notice of the time and place of such meeting, including a non-public session, shall be posted in 2 appropriate places, one of which may be the public body's internet website or shall be printed in a newspaper 24 hours. That's your general notice provision. It says begins except in an emergency. The next sentence, an emergency shall mean a situation where immediate undelayed action is deemed to be imperative by the chairman or presiding officer of the public body, who shall post notice of the time and place of such meeting as soon as practicable, and shall employ whatever further means are reasonably available to inform the public that a meeting is to be held. The minutes of the meeting shall clearly spell out the need for the emergency meeting. So essentially, an emergency meeting just relaxes the notice requirements. Instead of 24 hours prior to a public meeting that is 24 hours notice that is required under the right to know law. That is relaxed, and there's also some other provisions where you don't necessarily need the quorum relaxed. And the obvious example or hypothetical would be the school catches on fire. So, you need to call an emergency meeting to figure out where you're going to house the school, the kids, or you're going to, close the school for a week, what's going to happen. But essentially, when a chairperson of a public body invokes the emergency provisions, imperative action is necessary, and it relaxes the notice requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Collins?
No, I just, I think we've got 2 sections. I understand, the testimony that was provided previously about the consistency about education meetings, whether it's state level or at the local level. Sorry. I understand the consistency that's trying to be established here between state and local education boards, and I think you made your point in draft language. So while this is hitting 2 different sections of statute, I think it could be treated as one amendment.
Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I also want to thank you, Mr. Christina, for fixing the issues with the ethics part of the original bill, because I think that there was a lot of questions and concerns around how do you define that and the purpose and things of that nature. But I am supportive of sections 1, 2, and 3 of your proposed amendment, but I think that the new section would need a public hearing on that amendment. I don't think, since the New Hampshire School Board's not an elected body, like a school board is elected, I don't think it's something that we can add to the hearing, to the original bill that we had, because it's just it's different, and I would like to get input from all of the concerned parties on that.
If I may comment, though, please, Madam Chair. I know there was not a question posed. It is a public body under the right to know law, Senator, so they are bound by all the right to know law provisions in terms of notice, time, place, agenda setting, minutes, things of that nature. I get it's in a different section. I don't know, I know there are germane amendments, non-germane amendments, things of that nature, but it's a public body for right to know law purposes. And there was another bill I believe it was House Bill 1155, that similar content seeking to require, that came out of House Judiciary maybe a week or so ago. Similar content such that it's requiring a public body, or sorry, it's requiring a school board to have a public comment period. The original bill put that in the right to know law, so there is some interplay between the right to know law and then the duty of school board statutes where this may end up.
So, Madam Chair? Yes. I'd like to make a motion to move sections 1, 2, and 3 of this proposed amendment as a committee amendment and speak to my motion.
Have a second? Yes, I'll second that. Okay, you may speak to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would recommend, I think the writing of the first 3 sections is appropriate and addresses all the concerns that we heard in the public hearing. The new proposed section, I would just recommend that this be brought forward in the House if this bill passes the Senate, and that they include this portion in their public hearing of this bill.
Okay, let me see if I got that right. RSA 189:74, those 3, 1, 2, and 3, you'd like to have as a committee amendment?
Correct.
And what was your suggestion for the new section? To
For the
be-
new section, I would recommend that Mr. Christina bring this forward in the House public hearing timeframe if this passes the Senate.
If what? If this and the bill?
If this legislation, SB 410, as my proposed amendment would do to it.
Okay, so what about this new section? Do you want that put over to the House for one of their education hearings?
I'm not going to do anything with that.
Okay, you're leaving that to Mr. Christina to talk to the House. Okay? Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I agree with incorporating these, or replace all amendment. I assume that's what is
Yep.
the proposal on the floor. Replace all in 410 with sections 1, 2, 3 amended to 189-74. But I think that just, and I'll be glad to introduce the 21-9 amendment after this. But I'll speak to it just now, so just we can think about it for a second. I've heard more about this issue than I have of school board issues. Really.
Interesting.
Surprise.
I've not even heard it.
That people have wanted to have that public comment period. You know, it may never get used. I mean, that was the same point that was made by Senator Carson. It may never get used. But when the public feels that they need to have an opportunity, there ought to be the same principles being applied. They ought to have that opportunity to know that there's this time, and here's when you could offer that input, and the public board would receive it. We know that education issues right now are at a public interest level that we haven't seen in a long time. And I think what we're talking about here is trying to establish a public input standard. And, I think this is an opportunity for us to make that kind of broad statement. Because if this is a targeted statement, this bill should never come to this committee. If this is just about Londonderry, this bill should never come to this committee. It should be a Londonderry issue. And I'm surprised it's gotten this far with this much support, but I appreciate that people recognize that maybe what's happened in Londonderry has some potential to be mitigated in the future with this action. And I think similarly, we should be considering this same kind of guidance to the Board of Education and offer the public the same kind of opportunity that we're offering at local school board meetings. So we can shortcut our initial attention, but I think we need to deal with both. Thank you.
So are you proposing that we keep this?
I will, if the current amendment is limited to RSA 189, Section 74, I can vote on that, but I will want to introduce then an amendment that deals with RSA 21, Section N.
Okay. So we are,
Unless the maker of the motion wishes to do that.
so Senator Hennessy's motion is to replace all in SB 410, 1, 2, and 3 with this. What about the rest of the bill? School Board Code of Ethics, that stays?
Madam Chair, it's a replace all, so it replaces the whole bill, except for the enacting clause.
And nothing else? You don't want anything else in there? No Code of Ethics?
Correct.
Okay.
Unless somebody has a charter issue. Maybe we should discuss that. There's also a school district charters.
Okay, we'll discuss it.
Okay.
What do you want to say about it?
I don't want to say anything about it. I don't know that we need that school district charters need to be reviewed every 5 years, but if somebody has an issue or is in agreement with that portion, I can agree with that or disagree with, or take it out.
Okay. Ms. Fenton, do you have anything about school charter issues, school district charters? Do we need that in this bill? Well, this is in the original bill. New section, school meetings, school district charters. Senator
Madam-
Prentice.
Senator Ward, while Diana Fenton is reviewing this, my question is, do we even need this section? Is there anything prohibiting school districts from reviewing their charters regularly, making that their own internal policy?
I don't think so. The question is, do we need to enforce it? That's always the issue.
Well.
Senator Hennessy.
So I'll just make one comment. So it shall be approved by the voters of a district every 5 years. So, but if voters want to approve it every 2 years, this makes it every 5-year approval period. So they could do it every 2 years, but then on the odd year, they're going to have to do it according to state law. So I think this, since we didn't really hear much about the charter approval, I would be happy just to leave it out because I don't know that this verbiage is needed.
Senator Prentice, did you have anything else you wanted to?
Oh, I agree with Senator Hennessy. We didn't hear anything about this, and I just went back and looked at the hearing notes, so I don't think, we don't need to do it.
So the motion I have right now is that we replace after the, what is it called, enabling beginning session here, to replace it with the 1, 2, and 3 that Mr. Christina proposed. And everything else gets left out. Unless Ms. Fenton has some important thing about charters. Okay? So, I think we have a motion on the floor to replace all.
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify to make sure I have it correct. So when I submit it as a committee amendment, it's accurate. So Senator Hennessy and Senator Ricciardi moved sections 1, 2, and 3 as written in this document provided by Mr. Christina. No changes to the language that was written in this. And then this will replace all. So it will replace everything that was in the original as introduced version of the bill, which will leave out the
Right.
School Board Code of Ethics, and it will leave out the section related to the school district charters.
Mhm.
That's the intention of,
Yes, so just looking at the original bill, I think that it would be inserted on line 5. And leave the effective date.
Okay?
that answered my questions. Thank you.
This is the committee amendments. Okay, did we vote on the committee amendments? Do you have a motion for the committee amendment? It was, okay. So we have now the Bill 410 is going to be replace all, and we put this new amendment after the beginning here, probably line 5. Mhm. So we're all set. Now we have to vote on the committee amendment. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Good, we have the 5-0 on the committee amendment. Now we have to vote on
Madam
the
Chair.
bill with the committee
Madam
amendment.
Chair,
Yes, Senator Khan?
I'd like to move this second section that's been presented to us, amending 21 and 10.
You may. You want to speak to it?
Second. I'll second for the purposes of discussion. Go ahead, Senator Khan.
Sure. Thank you, Senator.
Welcome.
Yeah, I think if this is needed, I'll just come back. If this is needed for local school districts, then I think this is needed for the state board. And you may say it's not needed for the state board. I might say it's not needed for the school board. I mean, any public body that recognizes that there's significant public interest ought to have a public comment period. And that's it.
Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I may end up agreeing with Senator Khan if I were to have heard testimony on this, but I didn't hear anything from the school board, the State Board of Education on this. I didn't hear anything from any of the board members on this. And frankly, I haven't heard from my constituents on this. I have heard various different related issues related to testimony at school boards from my constituents. So I know that as a legislator, they're asking for time to speak at school boards. However, I haven't heard anything related to this public comment period at the state board. So it may actually be needed, but we haven't had a hearing on this, so I don't have enough information to make this judgment, especially the language, where we're to go into state law and anything of that effect. So if we want to have a public hearing on it, I'm happy to hear it. I don't know that we have time to do that, but that's why I suggested that they bring this to the House and ask for the House Education Committee to have a hearing on this portion of the amendment.
Senator Prentice?
So, this is more of a technical question, Senator Ward, and maybe to Senator Hennessy, or just in general. Outside of bringing this to the House, in our capacity as a Senate Education Committee, without having heard that testimony, how do, having considered this in the context of the State Board of Education, how do we have that, a public hearing? Can we? I mean, it's not, unless, I'm just looking for a way to have it accomplished within, is there a way to do this within Senate Education, or does it need to go to the House as you suggest? I'm not doubting you, I'm just trying to, I'm trying to see if there is a procedural mechanism to accomplish this. And it might not be today, but just asking.
Senator Henderson, before I.
You go ahead, Madam Chair. Well, I'll just give my comment. I think we can do whatever we want. But I am not comfortable making a decision on this just because I haven't heard testimony on it. So that's why I say, bring it to the House, let them hear the testimony on it, let them make a decision whether to include it or not. This is all, if this all passes the Senate. If they pass it in the House with this in it, they can come to committee of conference and say, hey, we had a public hearing on this, this was the information, and then we can at that point say, yay or nay.
I was just thinking this 410 is going to go to the House when it passes the Senate. And at that point, they could easily introduce the amendment. And it will come back to us for committee or conference, most likely. Do you agree with that, Senator Khan?
Well, and I think that they could easily strip it out, too. You could go either way. I do think the question that I'm trying to see this as a statewide issue. I guess that's where I have trouble with the whole bill in trying to see this as a statewide issue. We had only testimony from one school district. And now we're going to shape statewide policy, statewide law on the basis of testimony from a single district. And if we're going to, so now I got to get myself out of that frame, because if that's what we're doing something that I don't believe we should be doing. So if I put myself into a different frame and say, okay, there is a significant amount of public interest around public education, and the opportunity for the public to have comment about and to a school board or the State Board of Education at this point in time in our lives and in our current times, maybe we should do this. Let's set a standard. And if that's what this issue is about, now I can put myself into a frame of saying, okay, let's do this. Let's do this for local school boards. Let's do this for the state board. And make a common statement. The public ought to have some opportunity to address, without constraints of an agenda, their input to public education boards. Okay, I get that.
Senator Khan, to your point there, I have heard complaints about not being able to speak at State Board of Education. So it's not an unheard of issue. So I guess I wouldn't have no problem adding this to the rest of the bill. And like you said, if the House doesn't like it, they can strip it out. Senator Hennessy?
So I will be voting no on this amendment because it, in my opinion, it's the Board of Education, like other state boards, is a different body. It's not an elected body, and although it is open to 91A, we haven't heard anything about how they would go about doing public hearings. There's 3 different sections in the amendment we've already passed. Should we be breaking out this amendment to different types of meetings that this board may have? Should we be applying this to any board at the state level? There's just a lot of unanswered questions, so I'm going to be voting no on this amendment.
Okay. Do I have a motion on the amendment? You're voting? You're voting in favor of, you seconded it. How is the vote? Who wants to, who is affirmative on the on the amendment? You're not going to vote for that, and I'm voting for that, so. Okay, so it's 3 in the opposed, 2, so 3-2 for that one. Positive. Okay, so we're back to the bill with 2 amendments. They're going to replace all. And we have another vote on the bill with the new amendment in it. All those in favor?
Madam Chair, I just want to clarify what we're doing. That way I can make sure I, again, submit this correctly as a committee
Okay.
amendment. So the section 21N:10-A was passed just now.
Yep.
In addition to what was unanimously passed, sections 1 through 3.
Yep.
So it is now still going to be a replace all amendment, committee amendment. And so by replacing all, the only section now that will be removed from the bill as introduced is the section related to the charters, correct?
Well, with the Code of Ethics is not in it either.
Pardon?
If you look at the
Oh, yep,
original
yep,
bill.
yep.
Yeah.
Sorry,
One-
yes.
1, 2, 3 are being replaced by.
Got it. Yep, and then this state board piece is a new section being added.
Yes,
Got it.
yes, and that's it.
Understood. Okay, great. Thank you.
So do we need to take a vote again on the bill with the 2 amendments?
Yep, so now we are at ought to pass as amended, so we can take the vote.
Okay. Bill passes as amendment, as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
2, 3, 5,
Aye.
okay.
Aye.
That's. No opposition, 5-0. Can we put this on consent?
I don't think,
Because we have one. Yeah, okay. So 5-0 for the bill with the 2 amendments. So one passed 5-0 and the other one passed 3-2. You all set where it's going to go? Who wants to take it out? I'll be happy to take it out.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. 410, 421. Four 26, SB 426. That's relative to adequate education grants for fiscal year 2023. Senator Hennessy.
I move ITL.
Do I have a second? The
I'll
motion-
second that motion.
The motion is ITL. Discussion. Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I applaud my fellow senator for making efforts to try and bring more funding to our schools. I just don't agree with the way this funding and the rationale behind it is set up. It creates another layer of what I think are stabilization grants. And I don't think gets truly to where we need to be dedicating our funding to make sure that we have the outcomes that we need for our students. So that's why I'm voting against this bill.
Any other comments?
Uh,
Senator Khan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so in support of the bill, this legislature and in this year, we have an opportunity that we did not foresee. There's so much now that we can see about fiscal '23 that we could not see 8 months ago. We could not envision that the state would recover financially the way that it has and have significant dollars available for allocation in fiscal '23, which we do. We could not foresee that when we were doing the school census figures for this year, that school enrollments would not rebound in the way that we had anticipated, that the pandemic would extend into a third academic year. The same rationale that we had for adjusting fiscal '22 enrollments is being applied in this bill, is being applied to fiscal '23. No different rule. It doesn't even require chaptered law. It just takes an amendment on session law to do this because the mechanism is already in place. It's already statute through HB2. So that's all that this is doing. And why would we do this? Because, again, we didn't foresee that 7,000 students who left public education in fall of '20 would still be out of public education in fall of '21. But that's the situation. Schools, this is disruptive, no doubt. And it's going to have a very disruptive financial effect. And we can't attribute this enrollment difference to education freedom accounts, or it's just people feeling unsafe about being in a large school setting. I think that's what we are witnessing for the last 2 years. So if it was good for fiscal '22, this ought to be good for fiscal '23. And I think we as an education committee can see that a stable allocation of state resources to public schools is an advantage. And this would plug a hole. It plugs a $30 million hole that is created by us between fiscal '22 and fiscal '23. And that's going to be spread across all of our school districts, all of our towns, 234 of them, and we can mitigate this. And we ought to give this to the Finance Committee and see if this is the kind of priority, and it affects local taxpayers. This is straight to a local taxpayer property tax reduction, because there's nothing else you can do with the money. I mean, yes, you could carry it over, I suppose, but we've got testimony that this will reduce the tax base. And I think that if we come out of this legislative session, having achieved that, I think we will have benefited local property taxpayers and provided a stable level of funding through this biennium for public education. Thank you.
Senator Hennessy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in trying to wrap my head around trying to support this legislation, I asked the department how different the declines were during non-pandemic times in our schools of students versus this decline that we're seeing. And Mr. Manganiello, and I apologize if I did not say that correctly, said that historically, on average, New Hampshire sees a 1% drop each year in students, and that this drop that we're seeing is no different than historic numbers. So this is not a pandemic drop in kids that we're trying to address here. This is not historically significant drop in the number of kids. And so I just, if we're trying to solve a matter of stabilization grants, then we already have stabilization grants. If we're trying to solve something different, and I just have difficulties with the way this legislation is written.
And I would also add that Mr. Manganiello said that this proposal could provide an opportunity to reduce taxes, but was not a guarantee, so. Yes, Senator Khan?
Yeah, I want to address one point that Senator Hennessy just made, and because I noticed that during the hearing, I noticed it in the hearing report, and now we're using that as a basis. What Mr. Manganiello was referring to is the difference between 160,000 students and 159,000 students. That 1,000 student drop, that's what he addressed. Senator, I don't think that was your question when you asked him that, but that is what his answer was. The drop from 167,000 students to 160,000 students or to 159,000 students can't be explained by simple grade level differences between an entering kindergarten class and an exiting senior class. That is not explainable in that manner. 1,000 students, I can agree with. I can understand that. That has been historic. We've seen that over the last half dozen years that I've been watching it. Okay, just wanted to make clear that we are still, though, with a 7,000 student drop that we can't explain. And it may be permanent, but we don't know that. And the same conditions that existed to mitigate that enrollment loss for fiscal '22 continue to exist for fiscal '23. And we have the wherewithal to provide that difference in funding. So that is why this bill is before us.
Any other comments? Senator Hennessy is working on her calculator. No comments? Okay. Thought you were going to come up with something. Okay, so I'm waiting for any other comments on this particular bill. We have an ITL on the bill, motion to ITL. And we have a second. Any other comments? If not, then we can vote on the bill. All those in favor of ATL say yes.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? 2, so that's 3-2, so who wants to take it out? Lusardi, do you want to take it out? You want to
Okay.
take out the bill?
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, 453. Relative to statewide pre-kindergarten funding by Senator Sherman. Okay, I'll do it. Change that from Rashadi to Ward on 426.
I move ought to pass.
Second.
What I have here. Do we have any amendments on this one?
We do.
So the only amendment we have is what Senator Sherman introduced when he introduced the bill. If I recall correctly, I know that there were discussions within the committee and through testimony by Senator Sherman that there may be the intention to have additional amendments brought before the committee, but I have not received any.
Okay.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, I would move Amendment 0489.
Okay, I'll second that, unless somebody else did.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Should I speak to the amendment? I
Yeah,
appreciate
you
your
You may speak to the amendment.
helping put this on the floor, and it feels like maybe we're doing some of this on the fly, but we aren't. We received this amendment, we received testimony about it, and what we have is a bill that was a little bit wider and not as targeted as the Senate Bill 453. Clearly, there's been some work between Senator Sherman and Health and Human Services in shaping the bill to provide guidance in the event that there are federal dollars that come to the state for pre-kindergarten education. It provides guidance for school districts that wish to adopt programs that are broader than the pre-kindergarten programs that they currently offer. I think what we recognize is that pre-K is probably one of the greatest assets that we could build into our education system. The potential for improving student social emotional development is terrific. And it's that kind of strategy to help assist students in their early development and prepare them for kindergarten and grade school. I think this has been demonstrated in many countries as a means for bolstering performance in public schools. So I know we're not going to get there without the federal money, but to provide guidance as to how school districts would bring those dollars into their programs is a valuable contribution, and that's why I support this amendment.
I know there was a fiscal impact, but I don't have the latest one. I have the one for the original bill. Do you have a copy? I think we got a fiscal impact on the amendment.
Senator Sherman said he would request a new one, but I have not seen that.
We don't have it.
Somehow I thought I had seen one, but maybe not. Because I made a comment on the other one that was with the original bill. You haven't seen it, Ava?
No, and if I recall without looking at the hearing report, I think what Senator Hennessy said is correct, that this fiscal note that we've received is for the as-introduced version. The amendment that Senator Sherman introduced when introducing his bill is a replace all, and he based his testimony on this replace all amendment, and he had indicated, I believe, and again, I'd have to check the hearing report, that he was going to coordinate with John Williams of DHHS as this program would be overseen by DHHS and not DOE in this
Right.
unique case. And I've not received any additional fiscal
Okay.
notes.
I have a note here, Senator Sherman will add an amendment on minimum standards.
But if I also remember correctly, and I should probably just pull up the hearing report at this point, but I believe Senator Hennessy had requested of the department to offer an analysis. Is that without having much time to get an amended fiscal note?
page 3. Ask Senator Sherman about the revised fiscal note, and if it correlates to the amendment he presented at the hearing, he will request a new fiscal note.
And then I believe in the testimony from the department towards the end of the hearing report, and this is all just by memory, which I don't know how I'm doing it, but Senator Hennessy had asked, I believe, if the department could just offer an analysis without the ability to offer a fiscal note.
On page 5.
The Senator Hennessy asked Mr. Manganello if the department could do a preliminary analysis on the amendment then, and he said he would get back to the committee. There it is. It's right there.
And we haven't gotten it.
So,
So should we wait?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Thank you.
Senator Hennessy?
it appears I did ask for that analysis.
You did.
And I have a question. I think that we also heard about some questions that may be out there still regarding the requirements for teachers and certification and the different level of certifications each teacher has and which level of different funding this might go to. Does anyone else recall that?
Mhm.
If you look at page 5, there's another bill related to the Office of Early Childhood Development. Before the legislator, it might be worth looking at that bill in conjunction with this bill.
So I think we just still have a few questions out there on this, if we could hold this.
So what do we need to know? What other things do we need to have?
Amended fiscal.
Personally, because I'm familiar with 170, RSA 170, I don't think that the staffing issues are where the concerns ought to be. I mean, it's prescribed that if you're going to be a teaching assistant, you're going to have this many years or this many college credits, and if you're going to be a classroom teacher, you've got to have additional qualifications. I think that the department, I think those are well documented, they're well known. I don't think that's where this legislation is headed. I think the fiscal note, meaning are there, and the fiscal note is significant. And just to give a forecast on it, the fiscal note to local school districts is going to be little impact because it's all going to be grant funded. The fiscal impact to the department, now that might be something that Senator Hennessy and the rest of us would like to see, because that's unknown at this point. We don't have a comment from DHHS as to what the implications would be for them to have to review additional grade levels. And so perhaps that is of significance for our consideration. What is our deadline for a fiscal note? I mean, for a fiscal bill? This has to be out of committee by what day?
March 17th. Well, in Senate Education's case, it would be March 15th because that's a Tuesday, would be the deadline for us to get this out of committee.
I think we need to have a fiscal impact note. If not
So-
for the individual school districts, certainly we need to know, we need to see what that is. And
I would
also-
withdraw my motion if that's in order.
And I also like to see, Senator Sherman was going to add something, an amendment on minimum standards. And I think we need to hear something from the HHS on this thing. So we have a couple of things that we need to have before we make a decision. Senator Hennessy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also just want to point out that the fiscal impact locally will most likely not be zero because not all kids will qualify for this program under my reading of this.
Well, they had a minimum standard for income.
Right. So that doesn't mean that there's no cost locally. if a local area decides to enter into this program.
So do you think that would be included or in the revised fiscal note?
I don't know the answer to that. And I think my understanding is that we can't get a new FN unless we pass this bill with amended, but that we could get a preliminary estimate from the department.
That is something I will have to confirm with the LBA. I know that it was mentioned by a individual from the Department of Education, and I'm sure he's correct. I just can't, I'm not well versed on that. I'd have to confirm and get back to the committee on whether or not that is procedurally how we would proceed.
So you're saying we can't get a fiscal impact statement unless we pass the bill?
An,
Still
an
present.
official one, but we
official
can get something from the departments.
Madam Chair, we've got a lot of time here. We have a lot of time. Do we want to take a 5-minute recess, check on that question? Because if that's the case, 2 weeks isn't going to make any difference.
When do the FNs have to be out?
March 15th for our committee. March 17th is the deadline, which is a Thursday, but as we meet on Tuesdays, we would need to exec out any bills with an FN by March 15th.
Okay. By next week, will we have, could we have that stuff? Week from today?
I think what Senator Khan is indicating is he wants to get an answer as to whether or not we can even proceed by amending it, by trying to get a fiscal note on an amendment. That was the clarifying question that we still need an answer to, which I'm happy to, if that's what the committee would like to do, to take a 5-minute recess. I can reach out to the LBA to confirm procedurally that is what would have to happen as we're trying to get a fiscal note on an amendment.
Okay.
So again, I'm not well versed on that. I'd have to confirm that with the experts, which is the LBA.
Okay, do you want to take a 5-10-minute recess while we see if we can find an answer? That's okay with everybody? Good. We will take a recess and return at what? 7 minutes? Is that okay? Or do you want to go to 10 of? Let's take a recess to 10:50. Thank you. We're back from recess. Were you able to find out anything?
I was. So I just hung up the phone with LBA and Chris Shea, and I'm going to try and do my very best to articulate the ways the committee could approach this as he did. So ultimately, that is what Chris Manganiello said at the previous hearing is correct. The LBA cannot provide a revised fiscal note until it passes the floor of the Senate and then is going to be sent to finance. So let's say this bill, we pass it as amended with, this is just a hypothetical. We pass it as amended with this amendment, goes to the Senate floor, passes the Senate floor, and then is sent to finance. Then the LBA would then craft a revised fiscal note in preparation for the hearing in finance on this bill, as the amendment that we passed, again, hypothetically, would change the fiscal note. So that's when that would occur, and then ideally, with the cooperation of the departments in this bill, which I think would be DHHS and potentially DOE, cooperating with the LBA, would draft a revised fiscal note for finance. Another option that was articulated to me by the LBA was the chair or someone on this committee, or even Senator Sherman as the prime sponsor, could request a financial analysis, which is different than a fiscal note. It will have similar information, and I think there's a caution in my tone about this analysis. It'll have similar information to a fiscal note, but it's not a fiscal note. It would be more of just the LBA coordinating with the departments. In this case, I think it would again be DHHS and potentially DOE on gathering the data to provide a little more insight on the financial analysis than what is included in the fiscal note on the as introduced version of the bill, because this amendment has been introduced to the committee. So I don't know if that really answers the best course of action for the committee. That would ultimately be up to you, Madam Chair, and the members, but that is procedurally correct, what Chris had mentioned prior, and those are kind of the steps the committee can take.
Well, it's good information to know how these things work. You can get a proposed bill with a fiscal impact, but you can't get a proposed amendment to the bill with a fiscal impact unless you pass the thing. And you don't want to pass it unless you know what the fiscal impact is going to be, so.
Exactly, and one
Okay.
last thing Chris did mention, he said the Education Committee, Senate Education Committee is a policy committee. So he's seen previously, if you agree with the policy and intend to pass it as amended with this amendment, it will go to finance, as Senator Hennessy is on finance, and then that's where they will look at the financial piece of the
Okay.
bill. So
Thank you, Eva. Did you have anybody wants to make a motion on what to do? I thought we were going to hold this. Huh? Senator Hennessy, did you want to say something? Did you want to? It seems to me that still a lot of information that we need before I want to pass this.
So can I request the fiscal analysis?
yes, what I was told by the office of the LBA is that, because I asked him, bearing in mind the deadline that the committee has to get this bill out of committee as it has an FN, is it's really dependent on the cooperation from the departments on coordinating with the LBA to get the information for this analysis. That is not implying the departments would not love to coordinate. It's more of how long that process will take to get the data that's being requested or that's being looked at based on the amendment language. So yes, you can request it. There is obviously no guarantee that we'll have this analysis back by the 15th. I'm sure all parties, the LBA, the departments, will do their best, but that was what was articulated to me.
So hypothetically, if we pass it, it goes to finance, they're going to request a new fiscal note, so the departments are going to have to get this information anyways, and the time frame is only going to be, what, a week longer? So I'm going to request a financial impact
Senator Shorty.
analysis.
I also would like to see the financial analysis, because although I agree with the intent of the bill, I am concerned with the local taxpayers and how that would impact them. So I really would like to see a financial analysis.
Now, is this something that the committee can request? Senator Sherman doesn't have to request it, right?
Nope, he does not have to. He can as the prime sponsor, but it sounds like if the chair of Senate Education is requesting this financial analysis or fiscal analysis from the LBA, they will do their best to coordinate with the departments involved in this legislation to get that back to the committee.
And do you think we could have that by next Tuesday?
I do not want to speak for the office of the LBA, but how I asked the question to Chris Shea was, do you think we could get this analysis back by the March 15th deadline? And that question was with the coordination of the departments and gathering this information. Again, I don't want to speak for the LBA, but in my unsolicited opinion, I'm not sure if we could get
That's
that
a
back.
month. That's 4 weeks.
Oh, I was responding to your question about next week. I'm not sure if we could get it back by next week. That would be a question you'd have to pose to Chris Shea, the LBA, and the departments so I can't answer that.
Maybe I'll go
Madam
down and
Chair.
ask them. Senator Khan.
Well, it looks like, just looking at the Tuesdays, we've got March 8th when we come back from our Senate break, and
Okay.
that seems like a nice in-between point. We're not pushing ourselves to a deadline, but it's giving 3 weeks to,
Now, there should be more than adequate. Do we officially request, or will you call them up and say, we'd like to have a fiscal analysis to the committee by the 8th of March?
I will follow up with the LBA on what the formal process is. I believe you would request this analysis on this bill.
Yep.
And, note that you are holding this bill and noting that it's an FN
Yep.
with the FN deadline bearing in mind. I don't know if you can attach a deadline to it. I didn't ask all those nitty-gritty questions of Chris, but, I think the emphasis that I was given by the LBA is that it's all dependent on the cooperation, coordination with the departments on getting the information to populate this fiscal analysis. The LBA will do their best, obviously, with estimates, but it was articulated to me that it would obviously require DHHS in this case, and most likely DOE, and their coordination on answering those questions and the.
So the fiscal analysis has to be in coordination with the HHS?
With the agencies that are referenced in the amendment. So definitely DHHS. I can't recall without going through it if DOE's referenced in the replace all amendment. I would assume so, but maybe it is only DHHS in this case.
I have noted here, Department of HHS, not DOE, so I think they're off the hook.
They may be.
Okay, members of the committee, is this something that you are willing to wait for?
Yes.
Okay. We will hold this bill, and you will request, with my blessing, that we need a fiscal analysis, and we need to have it by, at the latest, March 8th, because there's a fiscal bill, the fiscal notation on the bill.
Do you mean March 15th, Madam Chair? Or do you mean the 8th?
8th. I would like to have it on the 8th.
Okay.
Okay?
I do need, so Senator Hennessy withdrew her motion on the amendment, or excuse me, Senator Khan withdrew his motion. Do you withdraw your motion, Senator?
Yes, yes.
And then does Senator Rishardi and Senator Prentice withdraw their motions?
Yes.
Into your microphones by chance? Sorry.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
I think that takes care of what we were going to do today. I don't have any other bills. So we have two bills that we're waiting on, the 238 and this one, 433. Right? And everything else is done. Anything else that needs to come before the committee? If not, that's what I was looking for. The second, by Senator Hennessy. The executive session is closed. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Ms. Fenton.